Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be deploying a React application to AWS, and we're going to package this app using Docker. So this is going to be very similar to my video for Google Cloud, but I wanted to have one for each major cloud provider. So to get started, I'm going to open up my terminal. I will clean things up. I'll activate my Node version manager, which is just allowing me to use npm. And I will use npx create React app, and I will call it React Docker AWS. All right, so it looked like it finished. Let's go ahead and change into that directory. And we will run the app just to see what it looks like. We should just be getting the basic React application, and you can see that there. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop this, and we'll open up VS Code and take a look at what files were generated for us. So I'm going to clean some stuff up, and I'm going to remove a lot of these packages that we're not going to be using. So all the testing libraries and the web vitals I can go ahead and pull out. So I'm going to say in my terminal npm uninstall, and just paste those in one by one. So those will get removed, and once they do, we can go clean up what's in the source folder. So now looking back here, you can see that my dependencies have been updated. Come into source, I'll delete app CSS, index.css will come out, as well as these three files. So now all we have is index.js and app.js. I'm going to go ahead and remove some of these imports in here to make sure that our application works properly, because we just removed some of these libraries and files. And while I'm here, I'm also going to update my single quotes to double quotes, which is just personal preference. And in app, I'm actually going to go ahead and just delete this whole thing. We will say const app is an arrow function that will return a div and an h1 with hello world. So now if I close this up and I rerun npm start, we should see our updated application here in the browser, and it just says hello world. So I'll bring that down. The last change I'll make, I'll just say hello world from AWS. You can see here in the source control that it initialized an empty Git repository. I'm going to go ahead and remove that for now. So I'll say rm-rf.git. And if I come in here and refresh, you should see that there is no Git repository that's been initialized. Okay, so in the structure of our files, we need to add our Nginx configuration and a Docker file. So I'm going to create a folder called conf. And within that folder, I'll create another folder called conf.d. And within that folder, I'm going to create a file called default.conf. So this will be our Nginx configuration. Now we're going to define our server, which will be listening on port 80. Our location, which is just going to be /. We'll have a root of user share Nginx HTML. The index of that will be located at index.html or index.htm. And finally, the try_files will be the URI, /, and /index.html. For error pages, we will have a 500, 502, 503, 504, and a /50x.html. Location should be equal to /50x.html, and it should point to root user share Nginx HTML. And that is all we need there. All right, so we're ready to add our Docker file now that we have our Nginx configuration done. So we'll create a new file, and we'll just call it Docker file. And this will be a multi-stage build, so let's go ahead and define this as our builder. And we'll start by pulling the official base image. So we will say from Node, we're going to use version 16.5.0-Alpine. The -Alpine just means a lightweight version. And we will tag this as builder. We'll set a working directory. So we will say workdir user source app. We will add user source app node modules bin to our path. So I'll do that by setting an environment variable called path, and it will be user source app node modules, if I can type today, .bin, and we will map that to the path. Here we'll be installing and caching our app dependencies. So we'll copy over our package.json, and notice here I'm saying copy the name of the file, which is here in my local repository, and then a dot. This dot denotes that we're in the current path. So this work directory that we set up here, we're essentially saying copy package.json to the container inside of user source app, and it will be located at package.json. We'll do the same here for package-log. And finally, we'll run npm CI. After that's done, we'll create our build. So we'll copy over the rest of the files, and we will run npm run build to build those static files. And now we can move on to the final part of our multi-stage build. So again, we need a base image. Here, I'm going to use an official Nginx image this time. So here's the difference between the Google Cloud platform that I'm doing here with AWS. I'm just going to use the official Nginx image, and I'm going to use Alpine as well. Still want it to be lightweight. Now we're going to update our Nginx configuration, because if you remember, we just wrote one up here. So what we'll do is we'll run rm-rf, so we'll remove the configuration, etc. nginx conf.d, and then we will copy our conf folder to etc nginx. So we're essentially just replacing their default configuration with the one that we wrote up here. Now we need to copy over all of our static files that were generated in this first part of our multi-stage build, and we're going to copy that over to the user share nginx HTML folder. We'll expose a port, so we'll expose port 80, and finally we will run Nginx. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and test this out by building it from our terminal. So we can say docker build -t, the -t means tag, and we're going to tag this as React Docker AWS latest, and I'm putting a dot again to denote that the Docker file is here in my local directory. All right, so it looks like that's done building. Let's go ahead and clean that up, and we'll say docker run -p for our ports. We want this to be on port 3000, and we're mapping it from port 80. And we will say the name of it is what we just tagged it. So React Docker AWS latest. And it should be running. So if we go to localhost port 3000, we can see that our hello world from AWS is running, and we can see the logs coming out through our terminal. So I've created a free AWS account here, and I'm logged into the AWS Management Console. So before we go any further, I need to install the AWS CLI onto my machine. So I can say AWS CLI v2. We'll be installing it, looking at their official documentation, and they give you instructions for Docker, Linux, Mac, and Windows. I'm on Mac, so I'll just come down here, download the package, which you can see installed right there. If I open it up, it will just take me through the steps to get it installed on my machine. Okay, now that it's installed, I'm going to go ahead and Command Q my terminal, and I'll reopen it to ensure that it's available. If I type in AWS, it will print out some command help options. So this is how I know that it's installed. Before configuring it, I need to get some credentials. So I'll come back into my AWS Management Console. I will search for IAM. I need to create a new IAM user. My username will be just my name. And I want to have programmatic access. So essentially I want to enable this one so that I can get an access key ID and a secret access key so that I can use the AWS CLI. For permissions, I need to add them to a group, and I don't have any groups yet, so I can create one. Don't need any tags, and I'm good to create my user. So once I do so, it gives you a CSV where you can download your access key ID and your secret access key. I won't be showing you that here just for security purposes. But I've downloaded it, and I am ready to set that up. So if I go into my terminal again, I'll clean this up. And what I want to type is AWS configure. So now it's going to prompt me for these access keys that I just generated. For the region name, I'm planning on being in the Virginia region, which I believe is US East 1. So I'll type that in there. And for my default output format, I will just put JSON. So I'm all good, I'm all set up and ready to go. In order for us to deploy an application on AWS, we need somewhere that houses our Docker images that we're building locally. So for that, I'm going to be using ECR, otherwise known as Elastic Container Registry. So you can just search for ECR up here. I'll click on the Elastic Container Registry. And we want to get started by creating a new repository. It'll be private, and I will call it React Docker AWS. And the rest of those settings are fine. So it created my new repository. If I click on it here, I can view the push commands. And what I'll do is I'll just copy this first one here that allows us to authenticate our Docker client to the registry. So I've copied that. I'm going to go over into VS Code and we'll create a little script file that runs this for us automatically so that we don't have to type this out every time we want to push a new image. So I'll call this deploy.sh. We will echo out that we are performing pre-build steps, and more specifically, we are authenticating with AWS ECR. And now I can just paste in the command I just copied. So here what it's doing is telling AWS through our CLI that we want to use the ECR service. We want to get our login password. We are in region US East 1, and we're using the Docker login. Our username is AWS, and our password is from the account, and that's specific to you. So if you have a different account, you won't see this number. This is related to my account, so you guys won't be able to push. What we want to do is our build steps. So we want to build the image here locally, and we'll say docker build our -t, and instead of saying React Docker AWS latest, we just want to name it the same thing as our registry. So I'll paste that there, and the name is React Docker AWS, and I will tag it as the latest. Finally, we can do our post build steps. So we'll say docker push, and like I just mentioned above, it makes it really nice and easy. So we can just copy this, excluding the period, and that should push it up to it. So I'll say bash deploy, and it will run this for us. We can see that it prints out our steps that we echoed, and it should do exactly what we told it to do. After that's done, we can come back in here and we can click into this repo, and you'll see that we do have an image that we just pushed and it's tagged as the latest. We'll need to go into the EC2 service, and we'll need to create a load balancer. So a load balancer is going to direct traffic from the internet into our container applications. So we'll create a new load balancer, and we'll use application load balancer because it's going to be over HTTP. So I'll name it React ALB. It's going to be internet facing. We will use this load balancer port 80. We'll put it in our default VPC for US East 1A, 1B, and 1C. We don't need to configure any security settings right now. For security groups, we'll create a new one. So I'll call this React Docker AWS SG, and port 80 is fine. If you wanted to have SSH access into this EC2 instance, you would just add SSH over port 22, but we don't need that, so I will configure routing. For target groups, we will just say that we want to name it React Docker AWS TG. It's going to be an instance type. We're still going to use HTTP on port 80, and the default health check is fine. Currently, there aren't any targets that we can register, so we'll skip to the review, and we will create our load balancer. Okay, so now that we have our load balancer created, let's go into the security group that we just associated with it and make some changes there. So we've got this React Docker AWS SG. We can look at the inbound and outbound rules. So for inbound rules, right now we're allowing any internet access over port range 80 to access this security group. We want to edit these inbound rules, and we also want to add a custom rule. We can just say all traffic, and it's going to come from the security group that we just created. So this React Docker AWS SG, we want to allow this security group access to itself. We'll save that. For outbound rules, let's take a quick look at those, and it says all traffic, which is fine. Okay, for the next steps, we need to go into ECS, which is Amazon's Elastic Container Service. So up here, I'm going to search ECS, and we'll start by creating a task definition. So for this task definition, we'll need to be referencing the image that we pushed to AWS ECR. So I'm going to open up another tab and go there just so that I have access to it. And it's going to be this URI right here, so I'll just copy that. Okay, so back in ECS, I'm going to create a new task definition. It'll be an EC2 type. For the task role, it's going to be none. For the name, I'll just call this React Docker TD for task definition. I'll add a new container. The container name, we can just call this client. I'll paste our image in there. And notice that it didn't provide the tag, so I need to add that there. So I'll grab the latest one. Memory limits, I'll do a soft limit of 300. For host port, we'll do host port 0 mapped to container port 80 since we exposed port 80. You don't need any commands or environment variables, but if you did, you could add them there. And lastly, for logging, we'll come down here and auto-configure CloudWatch logs. So we'll add that. Our container definition is there, and we should be good to create this task definition. The task definition was created successfully, so now we need to have a cluster that will house where this service is going to run. So we'll create a new cluster. It'll be EC2 Linux plus networking. Our cluster name, we'll just call this React cluster. For our instance type, I don't want to charge anything here, so I'm going to use a very small instance type, which is going to be a T2. We'll do the T2 micro. I only want to run one container. I only want one EC2 instance running that has all of our containers on it. So here I'm just going to put one. If you wanted to SSH into it, you'd need to add a new key pair here, and you could associate it there, but I'm not going to. As for networking, we want to use our default VPC, and we'll select our subnets. So we had 1C, we used 1A, and 1B. For security group, I want to use this React Docker AWS SG. For the IAM role, we'll leave it at instance role, and all of that looks good. So let's go to create, and that has been created. So if we view our cluster, we now have the ability to create a service which will run one of our task definitions, and we only have one right now, so it should be very straightforward. So I'll go to create. This is an EC2 launch type. We're using our React Docker TD, the React-TD. This is the one I just created. We'll be in our React cluster. I'm going to name this React-SV for service. It's going to be a replica. I only want to run one container, but if you wanted multiple containers, you could put 2 for whatever number you want here. Rolling update is fine. Availability zone balance spread is fine. We can move on to the next step. Here I will grab our application load balancer. It's going to use the ECS service role, and we'll use the React ALB that we created, and we'll add this container name and port to our load balancer. Here you can see that it wants us to create a new target group, but what we'll do is actually select the one that we already created and just make sure that it's on the production listener port 80. Health check looks good. We can go to the next step. We don't want to adjust anything right now, but you could do some auto scaling, and I'll create that service. So it's been created. We can view the service, and we can check out the events tab to figure out what's going on. Right now we don't see any results, but as things start getting spun up, we should start to see some logs in here. So you can see that we've started one task, meaning we've started one container. And if you go to the deployments, you can also see our desired count is 1, pending is 0, running is 0. So as we start to refresh this, it should deploy a container for us. So I want to pause here and actually note that I ran into some issues when deploying this because I built it on a M1 MacBook. So Docker has some issues that they're still working out on M1 Silicon Macs. So what I had to do was go back into here. I had to update my deploy script to add the platform Linux AMD 64 because we're actually going to be running this on an x86 based machine. And then I also had to update my Docker file and change my node version to 14.15.1 because the latest one that I was using, 16.5.0, is currently not supported. So I had to make a few changes there and re-push this before things worked. But if you were using an Intel-based Mac or an Intel-based computer, it should work just fine with the latest versions, and you won't have to do any workarounds. So I redeployed that, I pushed it up, and if I go into my EC2 where my load balancer is, I should be able to see that my load balancer is active, and I can grab my DNS name, which is right here, and if I paste this in, it takes me to my React app, which is hello world from AWS. So a couple things that we want to do to clean things up. We want to make sure that anytime we run that deploy script, it actually updates the service as well. So I'm going to make a change there. So here in our deploy script, I'm going to add a new command, and this one will be updating our AWS ECS service. And what we'll say is AWS ECS update-service. Our cluster was called React-cluster. Our service was called React-SV, and we want to force a new deployment. So let's say I made a change. I come into my source. Maybe I said hello world from AWS v1. Save that. I want to redeploy it. So I can just say in here, bash deploy. And once this completes and everything gets deployed, that change will be live here on my website. As you can see, the app updated as expected. Finally, we can come into AWS and remove and bring down all of our services so that we don't get charged for anything that we're not actually using. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Next, I'm going to be having one on Azure, so that'll cover all 3 major cloud providers, and I hope to see you guys there.